was the first setback for me. The entire team that we had created, we went on to do 2 projects also in this entire, and also got an opportunity to travel to Pauri in Uttarakhand and transform a school over there to create a digital library. So that was quite an eventful experience for me. But during each of these different experiences, I always had this thing at the back of my mind that social entrepreneurship, or for that matter, anything in the development sector can happen alongside, but can never be the mainstream activity or the mainstream career focus that you can undertake in the longer run. And that is primarily because of the 2 reasons. One, monetarily, it is not as sustainable as you might want to be after doing things like an MBA, wherein you have a huge loan burden to pay off. Also, the entire industry wasn't really structured at that point in time, and I'm talking about 2013, wherein they were operating at a very in a very sustainable way. So that was there, and I, having come from a small Marwadi family, it was quite important for me to ensure that my pockets were full, given the amount of expenditure that Marwadi families have. It's even reasonable to take up something which is a little more sustainable in that way. So just after college, I took up a normal career. I had my own startup. I was working with my cousin, and I also worked with EY for about 3 months. Now, not demeaning or discrediting what EY does, but I didn't like it over there, so I left EY. Now, that experience went by. I joined ISB. There was no intention of taking up anything in the social sector. I went through the entire placement process. Now, this might sound strange, but I was rejected about 35 times during the entire placement process. I had a lot of shortlists, but I couldn't get a final offer from most of them. And that is when I say magic happened. I finally landed up in Samgra. This was a huge thing for me because even though it wasn't my decision, I always wanted to join this space. And Samagra, having figured out a sustainable way of doing it, I think when the time was right, things started falling into place. And as they say, the universe conspired, and I actually landed up a job in the area that I wanted to.
That's really very interesting. Like, really. So, what are some hardships you faced during your journey? Like, that you'll remember all the time?
I think first thing is that I took a lot of unconventional paths. I started my own company when I was in college. I explored the entire social entrepreneurship space, and also thought of making it a full-time career. I didn't mention earlier, but I also thought of doing the civil services at one point in time. So I had a lot of unconventional career paths in mind. And given the conservative background that I come from, there was a lot of pressure from my family to always take up, which is much more tested and much more stable in nature. So that was a very big hardship that I had faced along the journey. And second thing I would say was I had a lot of rejections along the way. Starting from right from an actors to college placements, there were a lot of rejections that I had to face along the way. But I think there were things that really helped me uh, be be on point and on spot during these phases, and that is when I think things started improving.
Yeah, fair enough. So, like, are there some skills or some skill set or some, like, things one should acquire or one should start learning in college itself, or early, so they can have a successful career in this field?
This question has been asked in a lot of forums earlier also, and this is not a very new question. So I wouldn't say that there's a very what I would say is very different from what you have heard earlier. But I do think that most of the skills that are required to be successful in any of the streams, not just development consulting, or for that matter, entrepreneurship, I think most of them are the common or generic skills that I think we are endowed with right from the beginning of our life. So most of them, I think, fall into five broad categories is what I put them into. Starting from the ability to learn new things and be very curious. So I think that is a very important skill, because even with the current role that I have, the day I joined, I have an absolutely non-technical background. But the day I joined, I was supposed to work with a team of uh, tech developers who were doing everything on MS SQL, and I had no background of it. The deliverable was something very important for the entire state and was supposed to be done in a matter of 10 days. So I think that ability is really important over here. Secondly, I would say common sense and structured thinking. So we've been taught a lot of times that, if you're preparing for consulting, then there are a lot of frameworks that you have to be accustomed to. And specifically, I don't know about the general consulting jobs. Management consulting is what I'm talking about. But specifically in the case of government consulting, what I've observed is most of the most of the things that you do are derived from common sense. So basically, if you put in that framework that revenue is basically your unit, the number of items into the price per item, that won't directly work in this area. You have to really put in your common sense, and at the same time do that entire thing in a very structured way, so that you ensure that you're comprehensive when it comes to covering everything. Third, I think is what's important is communication. This again is a very common thing that's said across platforms. Communication is important primarily for the reason that a major problem that I faced when I came to Delhi was communication. I came from an area wherein, even though I did my entire schooling from an English medium school, people, or for that matter, children or students in the school don't really talk in English. It's only when you have to talk to maybe the teacher or there is some meeting, then you talk in English. But otherwise, the common tongue is always Hindi. So I had a lot of issues when I joined SRCC. But I think it's also important to observe that you might be very skilled in terms of thinking innovative solutions and or maybe proposing very good ideas. But if you can't communicate them to the right stakeholders in the right manner, then your ideas are of no use. So I think communication, both written and oral, are really important in that way, just to put your point across and get people to align with what you said. Uh, Third, I think empathy broadly, and this I think I've really gathered over a period of time. I was actually recognized as an Ashoka Youth Venturer by this foundation called Ashoka India for my work with Connecting Dreams Foundation at SR. And broadly, they had this one value around this single word of has been positioned in different ways at different points in time. So in consulting, people hear this word as management, whereas other times you hear team, people that you're working with. If you can understand really well, and if you can put yourself in their shoes and think what is it that they would be thinking at that point in time, I think all these things around stakeholder management, teamwork would really very easily fall through. And one last skill I think that I think I really pride myself in having this skill is resilience. Like I said earlier, I think I've gotten a lot of rejections over the past 6-7 years, and I think the only thing that kept me going was the fact that I kept my calm and I kept concentrating on what I had to do, not what people around me were saying, or for that matter, whatever they thought was what was appropriate for me. So I think broadly these 5 skills, just to summarize, curiosity and ability to learn new things very quickly, then common sense and structured thinking, communication, both oral and written, empathy, and resilience. And these are the 5 skills that I think would really cover all important skills that you would require, both in terms of hard skills and soft skills, to really prosper in any career that you take up.
Okay. Okay. So Akash, are you sorry? As you mentioned that you failed a lot of failures and rejections. So what actually motivated you to keep trying again and again and again? Because we have seen a lot of people quit when they face rejection, and it's not easy to grow from that point. So what made you go through it, and what motivated you?
Uh, I think there are two things to it. One may sound very silly, but broadly, the first aspect of it is that there weren't a lot of choices in front of me. What I've seen is whenever you have a lot of choices in front of you, then is the time when you can only doubt yourself, or you may pursue something different. So when there are not a lot of choices in front of you, you tend to focus on what you're doing. Even when you're failing at it, you will try to improve and find out the flaws that you had the previous time you attempted it. So broadly, I think that is one aspect. Choices spoil you. Second, I think is the fact that I do watch a lot of videos on YouTube, a lot of motivational videos. This may sound very silly, but I think they really motivate you and they really push you to
Keep that in mind, it will help us for sure. So, Akash, would you like to throw some light on the topic about the development of policies and development consulting and public policies?
Yeah, sure, sure. So maybe I can give you some brief background of the kind of work that I have been doing for the past 1 year. That will give you some good understanding of the kind of work that I have been doing. So yeah.
It would be great.
Over the past 1 year, I have been working with the, like I mentioned, Agriculture Department, Odisha government, as part of Project Adapt in Samgra. The way every engagement at Samgra is structured is similar to all consulting firms. You have an engagement under which there are work streams, and each of these work streams are owned by an associate, senior associate, or consultant. So in our case, I was handling 4 work streams. I'll take examples of 2. One of them was Kalia. If any of you have heard of the scheme PM Kisan that has been implemented by Government of India, then basically Kalia was the base on which this entire scheme PM Kisan was built. Uh, Kalia is basically a direct income transfer scheme for small and marginal farmers and landless laborers of the state, wherein 5,000 per farm family is transferred per season to these people, and they can use this money as and when they want to. This is basically based on the premise of universal basic income, which is doing the rounds for 5-6 years now. It was also there as part of the economic survey, I think 3 or 4 years back. So broadly, that's the idea. What I had been doing as part of this entire scheme was that we worked with the department, and by department I mean senior IAS officers. So here we were working with the principal secretary of the agriculture department to define the guidelines of the scheme, which included what should the components of the scheme be, who should be an eligible beneficiary, how should the pattern of assistance be, and all of that, just to make sure that only the people who need it get it, and also there is no possibility of people gaming the system. By gaming, I mean that people don't. The scheme is designed in such a way that people don't fool the system, and they don't get assistance when they're not supposed to. So that's the broad idea. Post that, this was at the policy level. So we designed the entire scheme guideline with the department, and then post that, what I've been really doing is hardcore implementation, which means we defined first of all a data-backed algorithm which was used to identify eligible beneficiaries from a list of applications. So the entire Kalia scheme received around 1.2 applications from farmers across the state. Now, mind you, total farmers as per the agri census are only 65 lakhs, which means that there are a lot of ineligible people who have applied under the scheme. So we designed an entire data-backed algorithm wherein we used and leveraged data sets existing at the state level, at the national level, and maybe with different partners also. And we ensured that this entire data-backed algorithm helped you get from that 1.2 crore to a list of eligible farm families. So that was there. And through this entire exercise, what we've been able to do is assist about 50 lakh farm families with an amount of 10,000 till date each. So this is one aspect of it. This is the scheme that I've been working on, and there are a lot of other things that come up with it. So I think things that are not really heard of, but when you're working with the department, what you do get as part of this also is a lot of RTIs. Under the Right to Information Act, you get a lot of RTIs, people asking you, why do you think I was ineligible? Give me the reason.